What is the next Mass Effect game going to be like? How is it going to be made, and what can we expect BioWare to take from previous games as influence or lessons for the next? These are all questions that Mass Effect fans are wondering now that Dragon Age the Veilguard is released and fans have had time to digest that game. And that is exactly what we will be going over today. What should BioWare take from Dragon Age the Veilguard, and what should BioWare leave behind from that game when looking for inspiration going into the production of the next Mass Effect game? But before we begin, if you love Mass Effect and enjoy Mass Effect videos like these, please be sure to leave a like, subscribe, and comment down below what you want to see in the next Mass Effect game. Now, let's get right into it. Now, as most of you know, this channel has always had a main focus on sci-fi gaming, but today we are going to dip our toes just a little bit into the world of fantasy when we discuss how Dragon Age the Veilguard could possibly influence the next installment of my favorite science fiction video game, Mass Effect. And Mass Effect is something that's covered a lot on this channel, so clearly it means a lot to me, so I'm going to take this discussion very seriously. I do also want to put the disclaimer out there that I thought Dragon Age the Veilguard was a pretty good game. I had a lot of fun with it. I played it all the way through. My initial playthrough was about 50 to 60 hours, and I had a lot of fun with it. Now, that's without saying I do think there are a handful of problems with Dragon Age the Veilguard, but overall, it was exactly what I would want from a modern day BioWare game. I got a lot more good than I did bad out of Dragon Age the Veilguard, and I can't wait to play it again, quite frankly. And as we know, BioWare always likes to take inspiration from their previous games and take elements from their previous games and put it in their future releases. They also do the same with the lessons they learn from previous games and how to avoid those going forward in future releases. So that's what we're going to be doing here today, discussing Dragon Age the Veilguard, what was good in that game, at least in my opinion, what was bad, and how BioWare should handle maybe both of those good and bad elements into the next Mass Effect installment. Now, we like to keep it positive, so we are going to start with the good parts of Dragon Age the Veilguard that I really think BioWare should take from that game, almost copy and paste, and put it into the next Mass Effect game. A lot of these things I'm about to mention are things that are pretty universally praised about Dragon Age the Veilguard. I know the game has a lot of controversy and conflicting opinions, but I think these things are pretty undoubtedly really impressive about Dragon Age the Veilguard and things that I think should be implemented into the next Mass Effect game. So let's get right into it. The first, and I think really obvious good thing from Dragon Age the Veilguard that they should definitely implement into the next Mass Effect game is on a technical level. The game is absolutely gorgeous. Even if you didn't love the new art direction that Dragon Age was going in for this new game, the graphics, the textures, the lighting, the visuals, everything was absolutely outstanding. It is a beautiful game, and I love and just caught myself in so much awe during this game, and especially the cinematics. I think cinematically, this is BioWare's one of the best games cinematically, if not the best, and was just super impressed, immersed, and loved this game on a cinematic level, a graphical level, and a technical level. It launched so polished, which is so rare for a BioWare game, and I think that's a lesson that they took from their last single-player release, Mass Effect Andromeda, which, although I thought Mass Effect Andromeda was a good game, launched just very poorly in terms of polish, and I think that's something that they really hurdled over for Dragon Age the Veilguard, and it launched so smooth. I didn't run into any bugs in my first playthrough of the game, and they definitely need to hit that hammer even harder for the next Mass Effect game. So graphics, cinematics, the technical level, everything visually that we saw and experienced in the Veilguard, I thought they couldn't have done any better. It was absolutely fantastic. So that's one thing they definitely should take to the next Mass Effect game from the Veilguard. The next one is gameplay. I'm much more of an action-oriented type of gamer and less of a strategy and tactics type of gamer. So I thought this gameplay in Dragon Age the Veilguard was by far, not even a contest, the best gameplay implementation that a Dragon Age game has ever had. I thought it was so fun and so clean. BioWare did a great job with the gameplay in this game. And similarly enough, it reminded me a lot of traditional Mass Effect gameplay. They dialed the companion number from 3 to 2. There's an ability wheel just like in Mass Effect. There are combos just like Mass Effect. In a lot of ways, this game felt like I was playing a medieval version of Mass Effect Andromeda, which is high praise because in my personal opinion, Mass Effect Andromeda has the best gameplay out of any BioWare game ever. And this felt eerily similar to that. And if I'm being a little bit honest with you guys right now, when I was playing Dragon Age the Veilguard, a part of me when I was playing the game from a gameplay perspective, I almost thought that the design of Dragon Age the Veilguard's gameplay was practice for when they started developing the gameplay for Mass Effect. That's how much Dragon Age the Veilguard's gameplay reminded me of what I think a next-gen Mass Effect game could feel like. I thought to myself multiple times, I think this might be practice for BioWare to develop the next Mass Effect game, because this gameplay just looks so, it feels and looks so similar to what a Mass Effect game would traditionally feel like. I thought it was great. I thought it was so fun. It felt so smooth. The combat and the traits and the progression system I thought was all really fun, really good, really polished, and I would love to see that same sort of thing implemented into Mass Effect 5. The last positive that I want to touch on before moving on to what I think BioWare should leave behind in Dragon Age the Veilguard is the ending of Dragon Age the Veilguard. The third act, the payoff, how they stuck the landing. Regardless of how you felt throughout playing Dragon Age the Veilguard, it is undeniable that the payoff at the end, that final sequence and the design of it was just absolutely fantastic. Without going into any spoilers, just in case anyone out there has not played Dragon Age the Veilguard yet, the final sequence of Dragon Age the Veilguard plays almost exactly like the final sequence in Mass Effect 2. It's basically Dragon Age's version of the suicide mission, which, you know, up until Dragon Age the Veilguard, Mass Effect 2 was my wholehearted best final sequence in a video game ever. The suicide mission is absolutely undefeated, and I was so pleasantly surprised to see that Dragon Age was implementing this into their own series. It was perfect. The stakes felt extremely high in the end. On a cinematic level, it was probably the best cinematic sequencing we've ever seen from a BioWare game, or maybe an RPG in general before. It was pure cinema, absolute gold. And they did stick the landing on a lot of story threads that have been building up, for at least in Dragon Age's case, throughout a decade's worth of storytelling. Yes, I am talking to you, Soul of Ellens. That final sequence in Dragon Age the Veilguard was so good, in fact, that if they literally copy and pasted that exact gameplay design from that final sequence, and from a cinematic perspective, and just pasted it into the next Mass Effect game, I wouldn't be mad. It was that good. If we got Suicide Mission Part 2 in the next Mass Effect game, oh my gosh, I would be so whole. But now we will dip into the bad, and since I listed 3 different things that I think are good in Dragon Age the Veilguard and should be pulled as inspiration for the next Mass Effect game, let's talk about some of the bad and what BioWare definitely needs to leave behind in Dragon Age the Veilguard, and just let it be in there. No need to bring it back to Mass Effect. It's okay. You can leave it in Dragon Age. The first thing I want to touch on that they need to leave behind and not bring into the next Mass Effect game was Dragon Age the Veilguard's version of their choice implementation from prior Dragon Age games. It was a very frustrating thing for me. I believe there are only 3 main choices that you get to decide on within the character creator of Dragon Age the Veilguard, of things you did really only in the Trespasser DLC of Dragon Age Inquisition to bring into your story of Dragon Age the Veilguard, which is, like I said before, just extremely frustrating. Mostly just because, first of all, the implementation of the choices from Dragon Age Inquisition didn't really matter much at all in Dragon Age the Veilguard. And then there's stuff like, if you guys know the story of Dragon Age the Veilguard and like how it's probably the biggest worldwide threat that we've seen in a Dragon Age game, how are just all the people that we've either played as or worked with in the past in other Dragon Age games, like what are they doing? Like, for those of you that know what happens in Dragon Age the Veilguard, am I seriously just supposed to sit here left to believe that the hero of Ferelden and Hawke, if they are both still alive, are just sitting on their asses doing absolutely nothing? I cannot be asked to believe that. I can't. So in regards to the next Mass Effect game, that is something that BioWare needs to leave behind. That is a design and a decision that they made for Dragon Age the Veilguard that needs to stay in Dragon Age the Veilguard and never see the light of day again. I think one thing that a lot, including myself, a lot of Mass Effect fans are looking forward to in the next Mass Effect game is a lot of closure for their past decisions in the Mass Effect trilogy. I think that would be a failure on BioWare's part if there wasn't a certain amount of closure for specific things from the Mass Effect trilogy, or even Andromeda with how many storylines and things that left open and unresolved. I think they need to make sure that most of our major decisions in previous games matter and show up in the next game in a significant way. I think that would be a pretty big failure on their part. The next thing that I didn't really think BioWare hit the nail quite on the head with Dragon Age the Veilguard was the pacing of the game. Now, I personally thought the main story and most of the companion storylines in Dragon Age the Veilguard were actually pretty great. But the pacing of how they were interconnected in the story I thought was pretty off and felt pretty odd most of the time. Like, when you're actually in those missions and experiencing those stories, I personally thought it was great stuff, but it was just a matter of the prioritization of them and like when you were supposed to do them and like which way the game was pushing you to go when it comes to like you should be doing this before this or after this, and just the pacing of the stories and the interconnection of the side stuff and the main stuff, and just kind of the feeling of urgency, like I should be doing this, but I know if I don't do this before, I might miss out on it or something else might happen. Like that kind of thing. I'm sorry, it's kind of hard for me to explain without spoiling Dragon Age the Veilguard, but just in general, the pacing, I think, of the next Mass Effect game should have a little bit higher quality. The pacing in Dragon Age the Veilguard felt a little off at times, and I do think that there is some room to improve there when it comes to the next Mass Effect game. And for the record, I feel that exact same way about Mass Effect Andromeda as well. I'm a Mass Effect Andromeda defender till I die, but one thing that I will admit as a fault to that game is I think the pacing was off in a lot of places and in a lot of similar ways that Dragon Age the Veilguard was. So I think they need to kind of go back to the drawing board when it comes to the pacing a little bit and try to make it more how it flowed and felt a little more natural and interconnected a little bit more how it did in the Mass Effect trilogy. And for the last negative that I truly believe that BioWare should leave behind in Dragon Age the Veilguard and not take inspiration from for the next Mass Effect game is the art direction. Now, yes, one of my positives that I spoke about earlier was the visuals and the graphics and how the game visually looks absolutely beautiful, and I stand by that. And honestly, at the end of the day, I didn't even think the art direction in Dragon Age the Veilguard was that bad. It just didn't feel like Dragon Age that much, and it certainly wouldn't feel like Mass Effect. Now, in a previous video, we've already gone over how Gamble has confirmed that the next Mass Effect game will be photorealistic, so we don't need to worry about it that much, but changing the art direction from what Mass Effect is at its core, don't touch it. It's a photorealistic game. It's a perfectly grounded sci-fi universe that needs to be photorealistic, and Mass Effect has always been ahead of the curve when it comes to art and looking great and it needs to stay that way. Now, certainly these are not all the pros and cons that I think either need to be inspired upon for the next Mass Effect game or left behind in Dragon Age the Veilguard to never be seen again, especially in the Mass Effect universe. But I digress. That is what the comments section is, so let's dive into it down there. Sound off on the things that you think should be left behind in Dragon Age the Veilguard or should be taken as inspiration for the next Mass Effect game. Let me know down below. Also, I have a fun idea of maybe doing a video like this for Mass Effect Andromeda specifically, another what we should leave behind in Mass Effect Andromeda video. So if you want that, make sure to leave a like on this video, comment down below what you want to see in the next Mass Effect game and what you don't want to see in the next Mass Effect game, and subscribe if you love all things Mass Effect. We are a big Mass Effect channel here, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you guys for watching.